This podcast proudly acknowledges the Yuggera and Turrbal people of Meanjin.
Welcome back to Brisbados, the podcast that digs into the character of Brisbane with its sunshine, strangeness, and everything in between. Today's guest is someone many of you will already know and love. It's no other than Matt O'Kine. He is a comedian, actor, author, musician, former Triple J breakfast host, which is how I know him, and all-round legend. He has starred in his own award-winning TV series, The Other Guy, performed stand-up across the globe, and released music under the name Boilermakers. But before all of that, he was just another Brizzy kid growing up in the city that we're here to unpack. Matt has recently returned to Brisbane. I first reached out to him really because I bumped into him at a wine bar that he's opened in the suburb he lives in, Tarragindi. It's called LPO, and it is an awesome wine bar, and everyone listening to this needs to go. And in this episode, we chat about what it feels like to come home. We've both been living away for some time, and especially for Matt, he's coming home with his family, and we just talk about the city's creative energy and Brisbane being this creative hub for a lot of people, but also the challenges. We get into some of the things that Brisbane could be doing better. So this isn't exactly a hit piece, this episode, but it is an honest conversation. So if you love Brisbane, or you're trying to work out how you feel about it, I invite you to just listen in with curiosity, because sometimes the most loving thing that you can do for a place is to want more for it. I really feel that way about Brizzy. I think it has so much to offer and so much potential, and I just want it to reach it. So with that in mind, please do enjoy this episode. Here's my chat with Matt O'Kine, and I hope you like it. What do you think of that?
I reckon this is working.
Okay.
I'm pretty impressed so far with the studio setup we've got here. A phone leaning on a cup.
I'll do editing and
You don't have to edit. You can have that on record.
all right.
I'm very impressed.
So, you and I are generations apart, right? I mean,
Are we?
Well, no. Hey.
I'm 40 years old. How old are you?
I'm 29 until August.
Okay. Well, actually, yeah, we're not a full generation apart, but we're pretty far apart.
We would have different references growing
Sure.
up. Let me put it this way.
Mm-hmm.
I was driving, my parents were probably driving.
Sure.
I was in the passenger seat in the car every morning in year 11 and 12, and I was listening to you on the radio.
That's cool. That's so weird because when I was in year 11 and 12, I was driving to school every day, and I think we went to the same school.
Yes.
Yeah, so I was driving to Brisbane State High, and I was listening to Triple J as well.
Really?
And I was listening to Adam and Will on Triple J, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I remember driving every morning and thinking it would be so cool to do this job. And then it wasn't until 10, 11, 12 years later that I was actually doing the job.
Wow. You just put your mind to it.
No, I'd completely given up on that dream. It just sort of happened.
Let's go to that. Who are you? What are you doing in Brisbane? Are you from here?
Yeah,
What's the story?
So I grew up in Indooroopilly, and with my dad and mum. My dad's from Ghana, West Africa, so he migrated to Australia in 1972, I believe, and met my mum. They had my sister around 1978, and then they had me 7 years later, which is a big gap. So I grew up in Indooroopilly, but in about 91 or 92, my parents separated, and so my mum moved to Toowong, into an apartment in Toowong, and I split my time between Indooroopilly and Toowong. I went to Ironside Primary School for all 7 years of primary school growing up in St Lucia, and I was actually Dux of Ironside Primary School, so I was pretty into my schooling and my sport and my music and everything.
Ironside's a hard place to be Dux of too, by the way.
Well, it was a big school back then. I mean, schools are huge
smart.
now. Yeah, it was. I mean, there was a caliber to sort of
Smart, yeah.
It's a nice school. So yeah, so everything was going pretty peachy keen, to be honest, until so I graduated primary school in '97. That's when I was Darks at primary school. Then 1998, first couple of months of 1998, my mum got diagnosed with cancer and died very sort of quickly. Happened over like the space of 3 weeks, probably. The sort of initial going to hospital, and then she never left, and then died. So that kind of put me on a very sort of different trajectory, I guess, for most of high school, which was when I was at Brisbane State High. So from then I moved out of the Toowong apartment, or I spent instead of sort of splitting my time between Toowong and Indooroopilly, I moved back into the house at Indooroopilly with my dad, and it was just me and him in the house for probably, fighting a lot, arguing a lot, as you go through puberty, etc. But then also having to deal with grief that you don't necessarily understand at the time, and that's why the Triple J thing's so kind of, I don't want to use the word ironic because it's not, but it's impactful to me, I guess, because when I was going through that time, driving to school every morning with my dad and trying to figure so much out, I was always listening to Triple J. It was like the one kind of consistency that was in my life. And so when I started on Triple J, I would always think about the other people, kids who were going to school who might have just had a parent die or whatever, who had me as a consistency in their life. And, that felt like that we were kind of friends or whatever. So it was
we have like my cohort has a parasocial relationship with you. Like I know you.
Yeah. Even though literally 10 minutes ago I was like, we don't know, you never told me your name, by the way. We've bumped into each other like 3 times, but yeah, you never shared your name. It's nice that you said that you were listening to me on the way to school, because I was like, well, that's what I was doing, in a very tumultuous period of my life. So yeah, it's meaningful.
Yeah. How did Brisbane shape your creative journey then? And also, sorry, before we get into that, how did you get into State High? That's a key.
Oh, well, I mean, I was the Ducks of Ironside, so I got into, but to be fair, back then you got in through, my sister had gone to State High, so there was, I can't remember if they still had the sibling rule, but it was either because my sister was there or I was also Ducks of Ironside. And
I don't think we had the sibling rule.
No, it got taken out around about the time that I was going in. I think there was a little bit of confusion about whether I was going to be allowed in via my sister or whether I had to qualify. Either way, I feel like I qualified just fine. So the creative journey in Brisbane?
Yeah, because I think Brisbane is a bit of a hub for creatives and for athletes as well. I feel like we're this secret place in Australia that actually holds a lot of talent. Yeah,
I think in comedy and stuff, well, look, let's go chronologically, okay?
Yeah.
So in high school, everyone was very sports based. It was a really sort of sports focused place, but I decided to start a boy band in high school, which was called 4.1, and it wasn't a thing that we took very seriously, but it became this thing much bigger than we sort of expected it to. We only performed like 3 times, but it grew into this thing that people either loved us or hated us, and a lot of people had opinions about us, and we won the Brisbane Talent Quest into Brisbane State High Talent Show in 2002. I know, right? Huge. But then people, were angry that we'd beaten this other rapper called KPS who was in our grade, and so there was like graffiti about us around the school, and how much we suck and everything. But people were asking us for, there were year 8 girls asking us for our autographs and stuff. It was all a very strange period. Teachers had to have private meetings with us that literally to tell us that we were becoming too influential and we needed to just step back from and stuff. So that was a weird step for me as a creative, because boy bands were not cool. It was like really cheesy to be in a boy band then, and certainly all the jocks, the footy players and stuff like that. It was a really kind of It was a risky thing to do, to put yourself out there like that. And so, but ultimately, the creative journey started when my mum died, and I realised that there was no point in holding back from that creativity. It was something that I'd always wanted to do. And I realised that there was no point in living a life for other people. So, you know, my dad would have loved me to be an academic or a science sort of based person because he's a dentist. And, you know, I wanted to be really good at Japanese because my sister had been good at Japanese. And I wanted to get a good OP because my sister had gotten a good OP. And I suddenly realised when my mum died that I really just wanted to make things and create things and be an artist.
Wow.
And so that was a big turning point. I remember walking into Japanese class in year 9 and going, why am I here? I hate it. I'm not good at this. I'm not naturally good at this.
Yeah. It's such an early age to have that lesson.
Yeah, but that's only because my mum had died. If she hadn't died, I would still be doing Japanese, you know, and I'd still be trying to be good. I'd still be trying to be smart.
Yeah.
I'd still be trying to be this thing for other people instead of just going like, I don't care about any of that stuff. I just want to make music and, you know, act and do all those things.
Yeah.
So when I started that, then, you know, my dad was thankfully, I think, just glad that I wasn't on the streets. Because there was also, you know, a slight possibility that was going to happen. So he encouraged me to kind of just do something after school that would keep me safe and occupied, and, you know, those sort of creative wants nourished, I guess. And so I went to QUT and did a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Acting, which was a difficult course to get into, but I managed. I was naive enough to just assume that I deserved it, you know. And about 1,000 people auditioned in that year, and they only chose maybe 16, but I was one of them. And it was at the same time I'd been selected to do this AFL.
Oh, wow.
AFL program with so it's called the NAB AFL Star Search, and they were sort of they get a group of people who'd been playing AFL, you know, in high school to like go to the Gabba and do lots of testing and like training and stuff like that to then try and sort of funnel you into the AFL or a higher level competition. And I was doing that at the same time that I got selected for acting school, and my acting teacher said, so what do you do outside of acting? And I said, I'm currently doing this AFL program. And she said, oh, you're going to have to quit. And I was like, why? And she goes, well, because you'll hurt your face. And I was like, what? And she's like, you can't hurt your face if you're going to be an actor. Yeah, literally. She's like, you cannot do that. You cannot be walking in here with scars all over your face from the weekend before. Like, you've got to protect your instrument,
your assets.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
You know, hurting literally, you can't, hurting your bones. Can't break things. It's like, don't do that. You know. So she's like, you're gonna have to quit. And so that weekend, when we were playing this game in this sort of football carnival, I remember at halftime telling my coach, I said, "Oh, look, I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to quit." And he's like, "What? Why?" And I said, "Oh, because I've just gotten into drama school and I don't want to hurt my face." And he was like, "What?" And I was like, "Yeah, I've just been told I should probably stop because I don't want to hurt my face." He's like, "You don't want to hurt your face?" So then at halftime, in front of all the boys in the shed, he's like, "Boys, gather round. Matt here's not going to be playing with us anymore because he doesn't want to hurt his face. So he's going to be off to drama school now. So it's time for everyone to say goodbye to Matt." And of course, you can imagine a shed full of AFL boys, high schools, just were so supportive of that decision as well.
No bullying.
No, not at all. No racial slurs. I mean, no homophobic slurs. No, not at all. Just absolutely going at me. And then as I was walking out of the locker room, he goes, "Oh, well, good luck, Matt. Let's hope we see you on Neighbours one day." And I was on Neighbours one day. I did one day on Neighbours in 2012, and I'm like, sucked it.
Suck that.
Yeah, exactly.
Guess you did.
So I've always found that there was growing up, there was a very clear divide between the sports and the arts, which is such a weird position for so many people. You know, I think especially in Brisbane at the time when I was growing up, it was just like, you're either into footy or you're soft,
Yeah.
But really, sport and art should exist together. They're exactly the same thing. It's all about people coming out and being excited and being drawn along by a kind of drama or a theatre, and they should be working together with each other, and they should be really supporting. And because I mean, people are like, oh, as if I'd go to the theatre. That's soft or whatever. Equally, some other homophobic slur.
Yeah.
But then, have you watched like the intro to A State of Origin? You got like dramatic music, and they're like, oh, which mate's gonna win? This is drama at the ultimate level. And you're like, so you do like drama, you do like it. You just don't like it. You just want people hurting themselves in the drama as opposed to being on stage. So yeah, but to finally get back to your question, the Brisbane, I do find punches above its weight in the arts sense. I think we've produced a lot of comedians compared to like the amount of, say, clubs that we have and rooms that we have. We've produced a lot of comedians that have gone on to on a national level. We've produced a lot of bands that have gone on to really break them on a national level. So I'm pretty proud of being from Brisbane and being a part of that scene and cultivating that scene wherever I can, and being a part of the rise. Where we fall down is that there is a ceiling here, and people eventually feel the need to move away.
Yeah, and so that was going to be my next question: is why did you move away? Because there's this historically, I feel like you get to a point where there's a brain drain out of Brisbane, where all the bigger thinkers, maybe people who want more opportunity, head to Sydney, Melbourne, London.
Yeah.
And then I think for the first time in history, we're coming back, and I think that's where the last 5 years of COVID's effects have happened. Yeah,
a lot of people have come back, but it's still a little bit of a culture shock to come back and realise that to get the wheels turning here is a little bit more difficult than everyone kind of anticipated.
Yeah.
There's still a reluctance, and there's some fundamental drawbacks in Brisbane, or holdback, I guess, in Brisbane, that make things not as accessible as they should be. One of my favourite clips that I saw recently was talking about this particular precinct down near Roma Street Parklands, where in the 70s or 80s, the council, well, I don't know whether it was council or whether it was a private operator, but they replaced a theatre in the city with a car park. And that, to me, is such a great example of what is the problem with Brisbane.
Hearing that, it's like that's quintessential Brisbane. Like that's
like, it's like, of course they did.
Yeah.
Of course they did. Of course they removed a theatre and they put in a car park.
Yeah.
Like it is so classically Brisbane that you then go, well, why does everyone leave? And it's like, because people are prioritising cars and traffic over like good accessibility and connectivity. It's like this car addiction that we have in this city. People don't realise that to widen roads and to put more car parks in and stuff like that, it separates us so much more than it does in any kind of community and neighbourhood in which people are forced to be closer together. So if you look at your places like so much through Melbourne and so much through Sydney, Surrey Hills, Newtown, etc., there are small roads, there are small lanes, there are the space between the shops, the footpath, and the cars is so cramped and small that everyone's there, everyone's interacting with each other. It means that there's more connectivity when it comes to people walking around places, going from venue to venue. There's smaller venues. So here in Brisbane, we have these huge venues. Everything's huge. Everything has to be massive. Huge restaurants, huge shopping centres, huge car parks, huge supermarkets. There's no, we're losing the everything that's small. And so much of that small space is what feeds into the big stuff. So when you lose the small stuff, you don't get the ability to do you lose the 50-seat theatre, and with losing the 50-seat theatre, it means you lose the open mic night and the people who are just putting on a tiny show for their friends. And you also then lose the people who have gone to a small restaurant that's just down the road from their house. They've walked out of their house, they've gone to a small restaurant for food, they've gone to a small bar for a drink, and then they've gone to see a small theatre show. in Brisbane, it has to be huge.
Yeah.
You have to drive 20 minutes to get into town before you can do it. There's nothing there's a lack of neighbourhood connection in that way. And so, I guess part of the reason why I say opened up the wine shop, that's where we met, LPO, in Tarragindi, is to try and do anything I can, even though it's only one thing, but it's small, but it's like getting people to walk out of their house instead of drive, and getting people to interact with the people around them, and allowing people a third place that they can feel like they're at a second home, like that they're able to sort of feel at ease and at home with each other, and to share stories. And that's just the start of the journey, I guess, that I'm wanting to go on in Brizzy.
Yeah, and I love that just like round table that you just have in there. Not quite round, it's probably more like rectangle.
It's probably more a rectangle, but yeah, you can say it's round, no one can see it on this.
Well, hopefully they do after this. But it's communal, and you've got the policy of bring in food from the fish and chip shop next door. Like, we welcome that. We welcome you to support other businesses.
Yeah, well,
in
that's
the area.
it. It's trying to connect people.
Yeah.
It's all about connection. And there is a distinct lack of connection that I find still in Brisbane that makes it a little bit, because it's such a big thing that needs to happen. Like, there needs to be an overwhelming kind of change in just the attitude and the planning of the city, which I can see that they're working on, but just on a consumer level, more needs to be done on individual level. Because
when we first met and I pitched this to you, you said that something that gets in the way of Brisbane is the town planning. And I assume you meant there's just a highway going through and it's not so walkable.
There's so much stuff. The walkability is really tough, and some of that's geographical because we've got so many hills and it's so hot that people are not encouraged to walk by the weather. They don't feel like walking because to get from one place to another is really hot. But at the same time, if you look at the lack of active frontages in shops in which the shop front is directly onto the footpath, right? That there is a distinct lack of that design in Brisbane. So what instead you get is you get your road that the cars are on, then you've got a footpath which is often unshaded, so there's no shade over that. Then you've got this huge car park of just black, hot, like desert that if you got to walk through in the middle of summer, it's just black, hot sun is just reflecting off this blackness, hitting you. It's just the whole thing is hot, right? And then you finally get to your shops where there is coverage. But that prevents the regular pedestrian who's just walking past them to get any shade or any sort of coverage. It also separates the shop from them, and we fill it with just these hot reflective cars. And some of these car parks are for an aging person or someone whose mobility is not good, to get from the footpath just to the front of the shop, it might be a 5-minute walk, and that completely disconnects that person from, or it disincentivizes that person from walking or getting from one place to another. Because if you've got to catch a bus somewhere and then you've got to do the walk, you're just adding so much time just to get to a shop or something like that, and it stops people from, or even from, say, crossing the road from one shop to another when you've got two that have huge car parks in front of them plus a 4-lane road and everything. You can't even just duck across to shops. It takes like 10 minutes.
There's
just
no
to find
ducking.
No, you can't just do anything like that. And so, like, the idea that that's the best way to allow construction, etc., and allow these sort of developments is what I find really frustrating. And on top of that, I was riding past today a old set of shops, I guess, in where I live, Tarragindi. And now this little set of shops would have been an old some sort of old industry building. I don't know whether it would have been some kind of butchery or like some sort of trade, maybe some sort of woodworking shop or something. But it was clearly not a residential spot. And there was 3 little buildings. And those were very run down, and they were very old, but you could tell by the design, and they were previously used as offices for a couple of like smaller sort of workplaces. But they've all shut up shop, right? And that block got sold. Now, because the entire area has been blanket zoned as residential, it means that no one can take over those shops anymore to do anything like put a cafe in, because they're no longer a food and drink outlet. Right. They're not allowed to have food and drink outlets. And so Suddenly they're a residential zone. The whole area has been blanketed as a residential zone. So what ended up happening is these three little, what were clearly once shops, got bulldozed and they got replaced by one great big house, which helps exactly 0.01% of the whole community. You know, it means that one person gets one really sweet big house,
Yeah.
and everyone else in that whole community gets nothing.
Yeah.
Whereas if they had just like actually taken the time to go, well, why did this used to be a little set of shops, and what can we do to maintain that little set of shops? That could have been a cafe, a fruit shop, and a butcher or something, and gotten people out of their house and helped everyone every single day. People could be going to that place on their way home from work. People could actually be actively using that space.
Yeah.
But instead now it's just one sweet house for some real rich person, and it's like, well, that didn't help anyone.
Yeah.
But for that for Brisbane to let that happen, and it happens constantly. Like you constantly drive past little places in the suburb in this city that you go, that used to be a shop, but it's now someone's house. You just tell, and you go, like, why did they do that?
Yeah.
What is this aversion to
Community.
to community and locality, to localization of
Yeah,
things?
yeah.
Why do we force people? Why are we so obsessed with forcing people into cars and going to shopping centres? And why does Westfield have these huge, have ownership of so much of that kind of, of those sort of developments and stuff in this city? It's like we're a shopping centre city, and it's such a bad way to live. Such an Americanized way to live. Because nowhere else in Europe would find that.
No.
But everyone loves going to Europe. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Everyone loves going to Europe.
We love going to Europe.
Yeah.
We love consuming European culture.
Yeah, and we love it. How many people love going to Italy? Oh my God, look at this. Even when you go to Sydney, you're like, how good is this? Or you can go to London, you're like, how good is this? But then we don't do any of it, and then we just build another huge shopping centre, and you go, that didn't do it. With a huge car park. Even if you lived across the street from a Westfield, it would take you 10 minutes to walk to get into the Westfield, because it's got this car park moat around it.
Yes.
So even the accessibility from people who live close by aren't incentivized to walk there. It's like we're so obsessed with cars and traffic and but what about the parking? Every single thing. When we wanted to open up the wine shop, the amount of comments, what about the parking? You're going to ruin the parking. It's like, fucking walk for God's sake. You know, the whole point of it is so you don't park. It's like we had a tram system, and in the 60s, and they at the time, the Lord Mayor of the council recruited a American traffic management system or transport consultants who basically advised to remove the trams and prioritise car travel in Brisbane. And that's what we've done.
Yeah.
And we've
You've
done it
really
ever
looked
since.
into this, Matt.
Yeah, because it annoys me.
Yeah.
Everywhere I look, I'm like, why are we doing things like this?
Yeah.
And there's this sort of mentality that we're supposed to just keep going.
Yeah.
Whereas cars, we should be doing everything we can to get cars off the road. And to get people walking. But anyways.
Active transport. There's a few great, I think, young people, 17, 18, 21, who are becoming activists about public transport and walking and things online and stuff.
Yeah, I was reading someone was sort of talking about, because my partner and I work really hard to just have one car, and it is very difficult. We're moving house right now because living in the suburbs with one car is hard, and we don't want to just become another family with 3 or 4 cars spilling out of their houses, and we're in the middle of the suburbs, and there is cars parked down our street all the time, all day long. There's because you've got parents. Each parent has a car, and then you've got the 2 kids, and they both have their own cars, and suddenly there's 4 cars to one house, and I just refuse to fall into that lifestyle.
Yeah.
So I was reading, I was listening to a podcast about the sort of the car-free community that exists here. I'd love to go car-free, truly.
Yeah. And that story, did you see that story about the Story Bridge where they've closed the walkway? So there's community groups who are just cycling across anyway.
Oh, really? Yeah, it's annoying because I ride my bike everywhere, and getting across that bridge is so annoying now.
Why did you move back to Brizzy? Because what are the attractions to it?
It was a great place to grow up, and I really loved growing up here in terms of the combination between, playing in the park and hanging out with friends, but also having a little bit of action and city and stuff. So I moved back basically with my daughter in mind. And family was close by, etc. So it was a bit of a support network move, etc. But also the sentiment around Brisbane from people outside of Brisbane is that everyone loves it. Everyone is like, oh, I was in Brisbane the other week and it was just so cool. I was so impressed and all that sort of stuff. So there's a really good will about Brisbane at the moment and a lot of positivity about it. But a lot of that comes from people who visit Brisbane, but they only stay within the kind of 5K, ring of the inner city, sort of cool, hip areas.
Yeah.
Once you get outside of that, it turns into suburbia pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And there are really cool things that are happening in the suburbs that I'm kind of excited to help, to be a part of, and also just try and help. If you go to Maruka Clubhouse, which is the old bowls club that's there, they've got such a great vibe. It is such a cool vibe. It's really kid friendly. They refused to have any pokies, and they were trying to do events and everything like that. And like that example of what a community club can do to an area is perfect. If we can keep capturing that, like there's a lot of those movements happening around the bowls clubs now. If we can keep capturing that, then it's going to be awesome. But there's still a fair few suburbs and still a little bit of the old school mentality that hasn't caught on yet. And some of that comes from a planning stage. Some of it comes from legislation. So for instance, one of the things that I like always sort of mention when people talk about the wine shop, opening up a wine shop was surprisingly difficult, and it took about 6 months of getting a liquor license, because you've got to make a batch of wine using Queensland fruit, which is all fair enough, right? But then the hoops you got to jump through with council talking to state government, and in some cases, if you're talking about wine, excise taxes, whatever, you've got to talk at the federal level. So you're actually working with 3 different levels of government. Yeah. So the council would allow us to. So we wanted to open this wine shop, and we wanted to, as part of the license, which is a wine merchant license, you are in some cases allowed to serve bottles of wine, right? But the council came back and said that we weren't allowed to do that. We weren't allowed to serve bottles of wine. People couldn't buy a bottle and drink it like you can at a restaurant, say. And that's because we were in this residential zone that I was just talking about before. Now, one of the things I find so funny about this situation, though, is because the council said, because even though you're in a strip of shops, and on one side you've got a takeaway food shop, burgers, chips, etc., and on the other side you've got a bakery, because this has been blanket zoned as a residential zone, you cannot operate as a food and drink outlet, even though you're sandwiched in between 2 food and drink outlets, right? So you have to remain as a shop. Now, what does that mean? Well, a shop means if you're a shop, you can't offer people bottles of wine, or they can't treat it as a food and drink outlet. You have to operate as a shop. Now, one of the examples that they used as the type of shop that we would be fully allowed to operate in that spot. So we couldn't serve you a piece of cheese. We couldn't serve you a sandwich. But one of the examples of the type of shop that they actively said, this is the type of shop you can use, is a betting shop. So they were like, you can open a betting shop here in the residential
Gambling.
zone. Yeah, you can open a TAB. Yeah, you can open a TAB, but you cannot give someone a slice of cheese in your shop.
Yeah.
Because I don't know why. because we've decided that these are the rules of this area.
Rules, yeah.
And you can open a betting shop, but you can't open it. Like, tell me, so who doesn't want, a cafe close by, or something that I can understand. No one wants a McDonald's or a Domino's pizza right next to their house because there's smells and wastage and stuff like that. But there also should be things written into the guidelines that can distinguish the difference between a Hungry Jack's and a person who wants to slice some cheese from a fridge, and put it on a plate. So there's limitations like that really frustrate me. And so instead of being able to have these sort of neighborhood wine spots, or small bars or corner pubs or anything, you've basically just got huge super taverns that, you know, are spotted all around Brisbane, and they're littered with pokies and they're littered with gambling and massive sports screens and everything like that. And that's pretty much still the only place you can go to socialize in a suburban setting.
Yeah,
So,
and then what does that do to how you socialize and who you socialize with?
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't. Those places are not conducive to the artistry that help the sort of scene grow.
Yeah.
So they'll put on a cover musician there in the courtyard or the beer garden of this huge super tavern. But, you know, where is the stand-up comedian going to go and do a gig in that suburb, or where are people going to do their open mic nights, or where is a youth group of kids from drama school going to go and put on their little community play or something? There's a complete lack of that sort of space, and those things come from the small venues. So right now it doesn't feel like we're doing enough to support the venues that support the artists, that encourage the community to sort of build in a creative way.
Just processing.
Well, I'm talking a lot, I know, so apologies,
it's great.
but
That's
I
good.
feel like it's when I look at the limitations of Brisbane, there's a couple of geographical things and a couple of planning things that need addressing as much as possible.
It just feels overwhelming sometimes because we're not a huge place, and we're getting there. The Olympics are coming. Why isn't it in the strategy to work on these things between now and...
Yeah, I mean, and look, it is. They are trying. Like, my partner works for Queensland Music Festivals, and they're trying to put on festivals all around Queensland to promote culture and community in towns all around Queensland, so that when you come to Brisbane for the Olympics, you can Google Mount Isa or Rockhampton or something and go, oh, there's a festival there, or there's reasons to go to these places. And I don't want to call out the council in any way, like the current council or the individual councils in any way, because there is a clear want for things to happen, but I guess it's just not happening quick enough.
Yeah.
Or in the right ways.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, they announced the 24-hour economy commissioner. The Stephen Miles government did. And now I have no idea what's going on there.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're doing anything. I don't know. There's been no announcements about what's actually happening. There's sort of, you know, do we want to promote a 24-hour economy? Because that would be great if we do, but now it's like that just disappeared. So the priorities don't seem to be as with art don't seem to be as forthcoming as they certainly are with sport. Like, it feels like it's all about sport in this city,
which is
you know?
great, but as you said to start with, like, there's such a potential for partnership.
And
culturally thinking that way.
And they're all it's about getting people out and going to places. Like, the stadium is just a big theatre, and so, you know, it would be great to see some of that same eagerness for the smaller.
Do you know what else we need, along with town planning and the modernising of council rules, perhaps?
What?
Daylight savings.
Oh, you reckon?
It's probably extremely controversial to
No,
say
no.
in Queensland.
I love it. I mean, we wake up so early in Queensland.
Which is
it's
wonderful.
Crazy.
Which is wonderful. But you know the reason/excuse Queenslanders give when you bring up daylight saving. Why don't we have daylight saving?
The fade the curtains or whatever, is that?
Oh, no, I haven't heard that one.
Oh, you haven't heard that?
No, I haven't heard
That was like
fading
the old school kind of like, I'll fade the curtain.
I was going to say the cows get
Cows,
confused.
I know. Well, the state's too big. We've got to split the state to do that. I certainly think South East Queensland should have daylight savings.
Yeah, 100%.
But, you know, we don't... That's another thing about Brisbane, is that there's a very kind of... We don't do anything on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday night. Maybe Thursday. Maybe if it's really good. But surely, people do not want to do anything. And again, it's because there's things that it's not something that they can just duck out and do. Like, when you live in Glebe or Newtown or Surrey Hills or Paddington or whatever, there is a local high street, and families live like a 2-minute walk from that, and you go straight from there. You go home, you walk, you step out your house, there's kids in the pubs, you can have meals, etc., and then you go home, and there's just not that kind of culture here at all. So no one leaves the house. They get home from work, everyone stays at home and nothing happens until maybe Thursday night.
Yeah.
And then even on a Sunday Arvo, like where the Sunday Arvo culture of going out and doing things is so big in other places.
Yeah.
Whereas in Brizzy, everyone's like
We don't have
battening down.
we don't have those old pubs either. Like I don't know if we had a history of pubs, but
Someone
they're all
told
going to
me
happen
that
still.
we didn't ever have the history of pubs, right? The same way that Sydney
The
did.
more settled kind of places.
Someone was telling me that the reason why only like you have these taverns that are like littered around the place, as opposed to every suburb having one or two pubs, etc., like they did, is because someone told me, and I don't want to get this wrong because it's about two religions. It's like Protestant and Catholics or something. It's something like that. I can't remember what the two religions were, but basically one was in favour of that and one wasn't. And so you'd have these settlements of these religious groups who, and in one suburb they would open a pub and that would all be sort of appreciated and stuff, and the other would not allow it. And so that's still the case. Like that's why you go through Taringa and they don't have a pub, but you go to Indooroopilly and they do have a pub.
Yeah, right.
But Graceville doesn't have a pub. So it's like that's just been, that's still like there's these historical hangovers that we have as well that like affect that.
Yeah.
But overall the move here was just I'm excited about trying to get more and more things happening and trying to do wherever I can on a very small consumer level, just inject a little bit of that community sense and get things linked up and get things happening and putting on a thing here or putting on a show there or doing a festival there, or I did a trial show on a Monday night the other night just because I wanted to get people out on a Monday night, 6 p.m. Monday. Let's do it.
6 p.m. is a great time.
Let's do it.
6 p.m. is a good time.
It is a good time. Finish work, go to the show and do it. But that would be, no one would blink their eyes if you did that anywhere else. But it's like
That's right.
Monday night.
You were like,
6
ooh, an
p.m.
experiment.
Yeah, well, it was. I wanted to do it at 2 p.m. Monday, and the guy who owns the club was like, don't. It's going to be an absolute disaster. I was like, no, do it, 2 p.m. I mean, there's other people who don't work full time that might want to do it, see a show.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like, it's definitely, trying to get people out of the house is the challenge.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's part of it.
Yeah. Last couple of questions would be like, what are your favourite kind of joints around Brizzy?
Well, Good Chat Comedy Club is sort of my favourite comedy club at the moment.
Yeah.
I mean, I still go to sit down every now and then, but Good Chat definitely has that little sort of smaller vibe to it. And the comics that they have are more of the up-and-comers as opposed to more of the established guys. So they're the places that they're good. I mean, go to both. Go to any of them, but that's sort of my favourite club. The Maruka Clubhouse is so good on a Saturday or Sunday arvo with kids. There's like a little pinball arcade there. They do the occasional show. They do put on the occasional little festival, and just the kids can run around on the green. Got good craft beers, so that's good. I go to Hiker Brewing for beers, either in East Brisbane or in Salisbury, and I also go to Soapbox in the Valley. And I go to Bar Francine in West End for dinners, and Essa is my favourite kind of higher end place in the Valley, but also Nikki Wine Bar in Newstead is really cool as well. Coffee, I go to Supernumerary in Salisbury. It's really, really good. They have the best croissants they get from a bakery in 8 Mile Plains, which I can't remember the name of. And I go to the Pineapple Hotel for an old classic kind of pub sit-show.
Do you have a favourite council pool?
I go to Langland's Pool, is my favourite council pool.
Yeah.
Outdoors, really nice, beautiful.
Is it heated?
Yeah, it is. So it's really, really good. I love it. And it's a really great kids play area as well. So yeah, those are my spots. Ramen. There's a ramen joint in Toowong.
That old little wooden.
Yeah, it's down the
there?
little lane. Yeah, it's so good. So I go there for a ramen every now and then. Yeah, so look, there's no lack of good places.
Yeah,
there's really cool spots, but yeah, I think it's just changing the mentality of how we get out and about, which would really change things in this city. So fingers crossed. Drop your car. Use the buses.
How good's the busway?
The busway's great.
We've got a world class busway.
You know, it is. It's amazing.
Yeah,
we've got a world class busway, but then if you catch a bus, in peak hour, you still get stuck in traffic for 30 minutes on Ipswich Road, and it's like, why would we not prioritise
Yeah, it's like the 50-cent fare thing has been taken for granted all of a sudden as well. Like,
Yeah, well, I mean, the
back.
50 cent fare thing is amazing. So massive props to both governments for doing that, because I think that is cool. Anything that can get us out, it's like... So yeah, fingers crossed. Fingers crossed we can keep sort of, leading the way in the public transports. Well, not leading the way, but, encouraging people in the public transports.
Because we have an active lifestyle. Like, I don't know if you've noticed. You were in Sydney, right? So everyone is extremely hot in Sydney. But I think Brisbane people are pretty fit. Like,
yeah, people are
single
so
person.
healthy here. Like
We are healthy, active,
There's a lot of, like, especially when you're riding your
strong.
bike around, there's very, very healthy people. Too healthy sometimes. I'm like, cool it, please.
Yeah,
You're making me
Relax.
look terrible here. Yeah, but like the bike paths and the bike network is really good.
Oh, the bike network.
Yeah, the bike network
cycling.
is really good. I
Yeah.
will give massive props to the council for that, because they've done some really good stuff. And those trips along the Toowong and West End sort of river parts of the bikeway, and I mean along Kangaroo Point, like, I love it. That's great. That's when I really feel so proud and like happy, when I'm in Brisbane, when I'm cruising along those sort of parts of town on the bike and everything. It's sunny and it's beautiful, and that's when I think Brisbane's in its element.
It's a gorgeous place. It is a gorgeous place.
But there's room for improvement.
There's so much
So
room
we just
for
need to keep
improvement.
working hard.
Yeah, it's the planning of it all. And like sometimes I feel like these conversations can be so dry because we're talking about like car parks.
Yeah, but that's the thing. But no one wants to
that's
talk
what we
about the
need
car
to
parks.
do. Yeah,
you know?
that's literally
now
the
when you
first
walk
step.
around, now when you're driving around, you'd be like, what the hell? Like,
Yeah.
why is there a car park? Why is that this? Why is there so many lanes here? So yeah.
Yeah.
I never thought I cared about this stuff until I moved back to Brisbane, and I was like, what's going on?
Yeah.
I didn't notice this stuff as a kid. I just took it all for granted.
Fully.
And now it's like, this shit's me no end.
Yeah.
It's got to stop. Anyways, sorry for talking about parking and planning and everything.
No, that's exactly what this podcast is about. Matt O'Kine, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks.
That was Matt O'Kine on Brisbados today. I was just engrossed. I know the topic was like quite frequently car parks and development, but this is such an important part of Brisbane culture that I really believe, and Matt clearly agrees with. I think we've got a way to go as a city and a culture to understand what health and wellness and community really looks like and why it's so important, and move away from convenience in cars only to being okay with walking a little bit and seeing our friends locally and building community within our neighborhoods. I think it makes for a more easy life. It's better for the economy, it's better for local businesses and creativity and play and all that good stuff. And yeah, I just found Matt's storytelling to be extremely powerful. I was just gripped the whole way through that episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you are in Brisbane, and probably not going to bother with the north side as many, but if you're on the south side or just curious, get to LPO Wine Bar in Tarragindi. They really do stock some really beautiful wines and support the businesses on either side of them. It's walkable within the area. There's a bus nearby, and the customer service is A+, chef's kiss. Just cannot get enough. I'm there like literally twice a week sometimes. Get to LPO, listen to Matt O'Kine's podcast as well with Alex Dyson, the Dream Team, and keep listening to Brisbados. We've got an episode coming up on Sunnybank, and a lot of other fun stuff as we go along in my little journey in coming back to Brisbane. So thank you, and see you next time.